Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston and I'm here to host this episode as usual. We're recording on a Monday morning, 2 days after Manchester United won 1-0 against Luton Town at Old Trafford. And I'm joined by my colleague Tyrone Marshall, who was at the game. So before we get into it, Tyrone, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Stephen. I'm very good. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you very much. Had a day off on Sunday, so I played some darts with some friends, and David May, former Manchester United player, was in the darts as well. I noticed him, so I didn't see how good he was.
Oh wow, did you win?
I didn't play him, but I'd rather not speak about my performance against my friends. We'll move on from that pretty quickly. I think it's probably best.
You'll be in trouble if you speak.
A wise man once said that, exactly. So the football, Tyrone, and obviously, well, we thought it was going to be a simple game, really. All I did against Luton Town. They were candidates to go down this season, heavy favourites at the start of the year. Not much has changed since then. They were always going to fight, though, coming to Old Trafford. It was always going to be a big occasion for them. But nonetheless, United had a lot of the ball, looked very comfortable, had a lot of chances, and it just took them a long time to find the breakthrough. They eventually found it in the second half through Victor Lindelof. But it was a bit of a scrappy win in the end for all the chances that United had.
Yeah, it was. I mean, all of United's league wins recently, well, all of United's wins this season have been scrappy, haven't they? So there was no great difference there. And although it felt like an occasion where maybe they could finally win a league game by more than one goal, Luton have only lost a league game by more than one goal once all season. I think that was away at Chelsea fairly early on. And the Villa game, actually, I think they've lost maybe two. But they do tend to stay in games. They're competitive. They can score goals. We saw them get that draw against Liverpool last weekend. So, although I think they are certainties to go down, they're not rolling over for teams. They're not embarrassing themselves. And given the way United are playing, I think they'd have fancied their chances to come in there and making it difficult. And that's what they did. And I can see them giving teams a game this season. I don't think they're going to get thrashed by many, if any, teams, maybe City. Beyond that, I think they're going to give teams a game. So United are always going to be in a bit of a battle, and teams are probably looking to come to Old Trafford at the moment and turn it into something like that. And United are obviously low on confidence. They'd had that midweek result, and it's hard to know kind of what impact that would have had, because obviously the result was disastrous. The performance was promising in large parts in Copenhagen. So it's hard to know how kind of that affected confidence-wise, but they're, like I say, it was a scrappy game. They were maybe a little bit better than they have been recently, created a few more chances. Scoring goals is still a major issue, but they were solid at the back. And I guess, going into an international break, it felt like they just had to get the win. It was the same in the last international break in October when they beat Brentford 2-1 just before it. That proved to be a bit of a false dawn. You wouldn't say from Saturday that you'd guarantee they've turned a corner and they're making strides now, but they are kind of stringing some results together, albeit against teams they should be beating, and they've at least put themselves at the right end of the table now.
We see it quite a lot when, teams come to Old Trafford who are down the bottom of the table and play a very deep line, a low block, as people call it nowadays, Tyrone. And United tend to struggle to create chances and find a way through. But I mean, the big chance that stands out in my head is, I think it was 10 minutes in, and Rashford obviously started on the right. He played that lovely ball into the box, and Rasmus Hojlund has to score. He kind of throws a fire at it, doesn't he? He could have thrown his head at it, or I guess his foot as well. It was at that kind of height. He had another chance later on in the game when he missed a header as well, I think from a free kick. But it was just another example of Hojlund being a bit of a raw striker, and we've discussed that at length on this podcast, because I think any other striker, a Premier League seasoned player, they would put that in the back of the net, wouldn't it? And it would be a different game if that goal goes in after 10 minutes, because you'd expect United just to cruise from there.
You would. Scoring earlier would certainly have tilted the balance more in United's favour, and Luton would have to come out and have a go earlier on, and maybe it would have been more comfortable. It was kind of similar in a way to the goal he did score against Galatasaray, his first one against Galatasaray, when Rashford pinged the ball in, and that one was a bit higher and Hojlund headed it home. This time, like you say, he just kind of bundled it towards goal, and the keeper, Kaminski, made himself big. It was about it, really. It was straight at him. You've got to try and, if you put it straight down the middle of the goal in that situation, when that's where the keeper is, there's a chance it's going to hit him, basically. It's pot luck, where you can guide it into one of the corners. You're almost certain to score. So it did kind of typify that rawness, and it's borne out by the numbers in a way. The fact he's got 5 goals in the Champions League and none in the Premier League now. None in, is that 8? I think 8 games now in the Premier League. Maybe 9. It is slightly bizarre, but we kind of expected it. It's very hard to judge him because we are seeing signs of a really promising player. But this is the issue we spoke about in the summer. And I remember the day he signed. We were on tour in America when he signed. On the day the deal was done, we were at United's training base in San Diego, waiting to speak to Erik Ten Hag. And a few of us in the press pack got talking about Hojlund and the signing, and we kind of said that a good season in the Premier League this year for Rasmus Hojlund is probably 15 Premier League goals. I mean, he'd be doing well to reach that now, but that would have been a good season for him. But that doesn't really equate to a good season for United. They need a number 9 who's probably getting 7 or 8 more than that if they're to challenge for the title at the very least, maybe even to guarantee top 2, top 3. So there's kind of a discrepancy there. And at the moment, he doesn't look like a 22, 23 goal a season striker in the Premier League because he's too raw. There's too many games where it just doesn't happen for him. And, there is the issue of not being provided with chances. He's not getting loads of chances, but he's not taking the ones he gets. The one against City is a classic example that that was just a lack of ruthlessness, really. As soon as he ran onto that ball, you never really felt he was set. You never really felt he had a clear idea of what he wanted to do. And I do think there's a really promising player there. There's a lot of raw attributes to like. We are seeing it, especially in the Champions League, that he can make a difference. But he's very, I think people at United described him as a rough diamond in the summer that needed a bit of polishing. But it's not really United's job in a way. And they haven't got it's their job in a way, but they need to be signing the end product. Rough diamonds that need polishing are what Brighton do, aren't they? It's not what Manchester United should be doing. They kind of need a striker who is the finished article, because at the moment they're going to be waiting 2 years. And I think in 2 years, Hojlund might be a brilliant player. But in this intervening 2 years, you're almost ruling yourself out of any kind of Premier League title challenge. And then in those 2 years, there might be another position that needs developing. So, I do think there's a really promising player there. I think he's probably done what United expected of him. But that also kind of creates the issue because they did expect there would be times where things just didn't go for him.
I mean, it is bizarre that he's not had a Premier League goal yet, considering he's scored quite a few in the Champions League. I think he's the leading scorer in the Champions League, actually. And I think back to the 3-1 defeat against Brighton in September at the end of that month, and VAR ruled his effort off. Do you remember when it was deemed that the ball went out of play? Then there was obviously the chance against Manchester City, that big chance against Luton on Saturday. So there's at least 3 chances there, just off the top of my head, that he should have had goals with. In terms of how long it's going to take to see that finished product then, Tyrone, you've said maybe 2 years. Do you think it's going to be next season or maybe the season after that? And I know it's a bit difficult to put a time frame on it, and it is really difficult to predict, but there is so much promise there. We've saw it a lot, and he's got the quality, but it's just, I guess, how long that takes to come out and bear fruit. Yeah,
I mean, it's very hard to say. What you really want is him to be impacting games the way he did against Copenhagen, against Galatasaray, every week, basically, or 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5 games.
Consistency is the hardest thing in sport, isn't it? That's the thing.
Exactly, the consistency is a difficult thing to find. I was going to say like Haaland. I mean, he's a bit of a freak, I guess, but maybe look to Liverpool like Salah. It feels like Salah influences 4 out of 5 Liverpool games. Maybe it'll be quiet one week, but they've got enough to step up. But generally, he's scoring or he's assisting pretty much every week. He's making a difference for Liverpool, and that is what United need their striker to do. Really, they had that with Rashford for a good degree of last season. Obviously, that's completely fallen apart this year. It's a different debate entirely. But as the number 9, you would want your striker, your main attacking outlet, to be doing that in a successful team. Saka does it at Arsenal, I would say. I think he probably influences 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5 games in terms of goals and assists. So that's the standard Hojlund has to be reaching. It's difficult to say when it will happen. I mean, it might just click. He might find it easier once United start playing better, because they aren't. They're not playing very well at the moment. And we've talked about the chances he's missed, but if you look at his expected goals, it's not disastrous. It's not like he should have scored 8 in 8, say, with his expected goals. I think it's still only around 2, something like that. So it's not like the stats suggest he's missing gilt-edged chances every week. He's just not getting loads. But it's also incumbent on a number 9 at times to just create something out of nothing, to be that focal point, to do something. And I've said it a couple of weeks ago, and if that was Harry Kane in that position, Kane would have scored probably 3 or 4 goals by now, partly through finishing chances like the City one, but also because he'd just find a way, because he knows his game, he knows the game now, he's got that experience to know how to, when it's not working, to fashion a chance for himself. You look at Tottenham last season, he got 30 Premier League goals in a team that had totally fallen apart. And Hojlund is not at that level yet. Maybe he'll get there. It might click for him in a month. It might click for him later this season, maybe next season, maybe 2 years. It's hard to put a finger on it, but obviously United need it to be sooner rather than later, especially when goals are so hard to come by at the moment, especially in attacking positions.
I mean, like, he still is only 20 years old. He celebrates his 21st birthday in February. So he is such a young player, that's the thing. I mean, I think you can sometimes forget that when you look at him, actually, because he's such a physically imposing player for his age, and he's got all the attributes to succeed in the Premier League, to be an excellent striker. So hopefully we'll see it sooner rather than later. An interesting statistic, Tyrone. If I told you at the last international break that Manchester United would be the most informed team, factually, in the Premier League at this stage, what would you have said? Would you have been shocked?
Yes, and I think everyone was shocked when
it's the short answer of it.
That stat and that graphic emerged. Yeah, it's how it's one of those, isn't it? How are we defining form here?
Well, that's why it's such an interesting little stat.
We're defining form here as results, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, United have picked up more points over the last 5 games.
It's been defined as results. They've won 4 out of 5.
Sorry, Tyrone, I'm interrupting you. It's a bit more difficult on the online. We're usually in the office recording it if there's any crossover there. But United have picked up more points over the last 5 games than any other team. But their performances, Tyrone, they're not of what you expect of that statistic, are they?
No, exactly. This is form as defined by who's picking up results rather than form as in who's playing well. And if you said who's in form in this league, you wouldn't say it was United, because those wins have been unconvincing, scrappy, against teams you'd expect them to beat. And if you asked fans, pundits, players, anyone, where would who would you say are the form teams in the Premier League at the moment based on performances? United probably wouldn't even rank in the top 10. They're not playing particularly well. They don't look convincing. They've not won a game convincingly and won a game well all season. So, what they are doing, like I say, is picking up results. They've got themselves back in the battle for 4th, you would say. They're going to need to go on a really good run and start beating some good teams, basically. But, they have steadied the ship, and if things do turn, they've at least put themselves in a position where they can capitalise if they do find a run of good form, as in performances rather than just results.
I mean, if you look at the Premier League table, as you've said, considering they've had the worst start to a season for ages, 21 points they're sitting on and they're in 6th. Tottenham have dropped points, Newcastle have dropped points, Brighton have dropped points. And regarding hopes for top 4, it suddenly doesn't look like a disaster anymore. I guess the caveat to that, as we keep on saying, the performances just aren't there, so it's a bit deceiving, isn't it? But if this is the worst part of the season and they can progress from here, then who knows? It might be a bit of a promising end to the campaign. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we were saying probably a month, 6 weeks ago now, about how they were 8th favourites for top 4, and Newcastle and Brighton were above them in the odds, and now United are above both Newcastle and Brighton in the league table. When you see how quickly things can turn with Tottenham, I mean, this time a week ago, Tottenham were being talked about as potential title challengers. Now they've lost 2 in a row. They've got a couple of injuries, a couple of really key injuries and suspensions. They've got Villa at home and City away next, and they could easily go 4 games without a win. Certainly, you'd probably expect them to lose at City now. The way they've lost players who are absolutely vital to their system in Maddison and Van der Ven. So you can see them suddenly dropping points and finding life more difficult. And United have definitely put themselves back in contention. I think like I say, with Tottenham, they've gone from top to 4th in the space of 6 days, basically. And they've got quite a slim squad. I don't think there's any guarantee they make top 4. You would certainly expect City, Arsenal and Liverpool to be there. You'd expect them to be top 3 at the moment, but that 4th place is open. And yeah, I mean, what you can say about United is that they've not played well at any point in this season, but they are in the fight. And if they do suddenly click and start producing performances, then they've put themselves in a position to take advantage of that.
We didn't expect that 4 weeks ago, saying that they'd be sitting on the cusp of top 4. I don't think anyways I didn't. They were just so poor. And like we say, things could start looking up sooner rather than later. But that remains to be seen. Anyways, we'll leave it there for part 1. We'll be back in a moment for part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, I think Tyrone will just get into some performances a bit more. Kind of mentioned Hojlund being wasteful in the first part, but I thought it was worth mentioning Garnacho as well, and Rashford. Obviously, Garnacho started on the left recently, and Rashford's been out on the right. And there was a big chance for Garnacho. He got played through, and I think kind of hesitated, didn't he? Kind of took an extra touch, didn't really get the shot off, and Luton's goalkeeper kind of smothered the ball and saved it. And he really should have done better there. And we've talked about this with Garnacho multiple times, where he's not having the same impact on games from the start. What have you thought about his performances of recent weeks? Because he's been given permission or the nod to play on that left side, and Rashford's been moved out to the right. Would it not be interesting to put Rashford back on the left and let Garnacho play on the right? Because when you think about what he's good at, beating players, driving to the byline, you could do that on the right, couldn't he? And then we could have Rashford cutting in on the left. I think that would work a little bit better for me. Yeah,
I think it would be interesting to see it long term and maybe see that given a chance. I guess the thinking is that, you know, Garnacho has spent so much time on the left and he's quite inexperienced. Rashford has probably got the experience to play on the right, and I'm guessing Ten Hag thinks that he can, you know, through that experience, number of games he's played, he can make a difference. And you know, I think we have seen signs of improvement from Rashford on the right. He scored there during the World Cup last year. Just after the World Cup, I think he scored against Burnley from the right. Created Hojlund's goal from that position against Galatasaray. Could have created one for him at the weekend. So we are seeing that impact. I think it just shows that neither of them want to play on the right. I think they would both be absolutely desperate to play on the left. You know, I thought that front three worked pretty well in Copenhagen, and I wanted to see it again. It was, you know, it was okay again, but you know, both Garnacho and Rashford missed chances they really should score. Garnacho's just looked like a player who didn't know what to do when the ball arrived at his feet. Basically, you know, that should have been. We had so much space. It should have been either first time hit it or one touch and hit it. And he took a touch. Keeper was coming out, took another touch.
I think he hit it first time there.
Yeah, I think you probably hit it first time. I think that's probably the way to do it. And at the very least, you take a touch to set yourself and then you hit it. But he took a touch, took another touch, then tried to go around the keeper, and the chance was gone. And it just, you know, it smacked to someone who was just a bit indecisive in that position and maybe forgotten how to score goals. And the same with Rashford in the second half. That was a pretty decent chance when he was back on the left and kind of rolled the ball under his studs, and then the shot was just straight at Kaminsky, really. That is a classic example of last season. Rashford would roll that out of his feet and stick that in the corner. It wouldn't be savable. And instead it was just straight at the goalkeeper and pretty simple for him. So yeah, it was... It did kind of show that although that attack has maybe looked better than with Anthony in the side, it just the lack of goals is a major concern for all of them at the moment. And this comes back to the Hojlund debate that in a way, you know, United, like I said, he's an unpolished diamond. He needs a bit of work, but the United are putting more pressure on him in a way because everything else is misfiring. I mean, no one else has scored more than one goal this season in that attack. It's basically Hojlund or bust, and for a 20-year-old who's still finding his feet, that only makes the situation worse, really.
I mean, this hints at a wider conversation with the attackers, though, doesn't it, Ty? Because, as you've just said, they've underperformed all season, really. And Harry Maguire talked about it. Obviously, it was Lindelof who scored the winning goal. We haven't even given Lindelof a mention yet, actually, and he was the goal scorer. But defenders have had to chip in a few times. You saw Diego Dallo at Sheffield United the other week, and Maguire said, look, kind of Rashford carried us last season, so if he's not scoring the goals this term, it's probably our time to step up and chip in a bit more. But you need your attackers to deliver. It's as simple as that in the Premier League. Rashford can't be underperforming like he is. Garnacho needs to put away his chances, and Hojlund needs to chip in a bit more, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think I think Lindelof is that 13 different players that have scored now for United this season or something like that. And you know, you can look at that and say that's great. There's so many players contributing, but a lot of them are just they're freak occurrences, really. Like, you know, Hannibal scoring a goal, Maguire scoring, Lindelof scoring, McTominay scoring 3, is it? Casemiro scoring 4. These are things you cannot rely on in games. You can't be relying on your centre half or your defensive midfielder to pop up with goals to win you a game. They're a bonus what you need is your forwards to be contributing, and I think that is a major issue. Hojlund's got 5 now, all in the Champions League. Beyond that, it's 1 for Martial, 1 for Garnacho, 1 for Rashford. I think that's it. So the entire attack, it's mid-November, the entire attack has scored 8 goals. It's absolutely shocking, and you can compare it. You could reel off, I'm not going to say hand, but reel off Haaland's goals or Salah's goals, or Julian Alvarez has got more than that. City's second striker, their number 10, who's playing number 10 this year, has got more goals than that. It is disastrous, and unless that improves dramatically, then we were talking at the end of part 1 about top 4 hopes and how they've kind of put themselves in a position to capitalise if they do find form. But if the attack continues to misfire like that, then they've got no chance really, because it's just, like I say, it's just not sustainable that your right back and your centre back and your holding midfielder pop up with these goals to win your games. It's great that you've got that, but as a manager, you're not looking at that going, right, how are we going to beat Luton? Yeah, we'll have a good finish from our centre back this time. It's a bonus, and fundamentally you need your attackers to be winning your games, and at the moment United's attackers aren't winning them games, and it in a way it kind of sums it up in a way that Hojlund's got 5 goals in the space of 3 games in the Champions League, and yet United have managed to lose every single one of those games. So even when he does score, they're not winning them. So yeah, I think they need more from the attackers desperately.
He must be so annoyed with that. I mean, he berated Dalot, didn't he, kind of in midweek when he made that mistake, because he must think, what have I got to do? I'm scoring the goals, I'm putting the ball in the back of the net at the other end. Just defend, lads, concentrate, switch on. A few substitute appearances then. Antony came off the bench. Mason Mount came on at half-time as well for Eriksen, who was unfortunately injured. He's pulled out of the Denmark national team as well, just today as we record. But I actually thought Antony was quite good off the bench, Tyrone. I mean, we've heavily criticised Antony in recent weeks, and rightly so. I think we even said he could be remembered as the worst signing in Manchester United's history in the post-Ferguson era, which is a big statement. But there was a moment where he drove forward and he played it to Rashford. I think that's the chance you were talking about before, when Rashford should have done better. So it was a positive cameo from off the bench. But I mean, there's a large bulk of evidence that suggests he's just been, call a spade awful. But if you can play like that, if you can spell out the team as motivation, then maybe there can be an improvement in form from Antony.
Yeah, possibly. I'm not convinced this team is set up at the moment. Possibly, yeah. That's as morale boosting as it's going to get here, I'm afraid. I'm not convinced this team is set up to get the best out of him. And I said it, I think last week, maybe last Monday. It feels, he is not. Ten Hag's now talking about them being the best transition team in the world. Antony is not a winger for that. When he gets the ball on halfway, he hasn't got the pace to stay clear of a defender or to run at defenders. He hasn't got the pace to beat a man. He hasn't got the trickery to beat a man. And if United's wingers are getting the ball on the halfway line or in the middle third of the pitch, then I don't really see what Antony can do. And I don't think that's solely his fault, to be honest, because that's just not his game. You're asking him to do something, he just can't. That's not in his repertoire. So maybe things will click tactically, and we'll see a different United towards the end of this season. But at the moment, I don't see why United spent 85 million on him. I mean, that was ridiculous anyway. But they've now spent 85 million pounds on a winger who just doesn't fit in this system, who just cannot play in this team because they're not set up to play to his skill set. And all his goals last year came when he got the ball in the final third, either running onto a pass against an open defence, or he gets it kind of in that inside right channel, 20, 25 yards from goal, cuts in, does a Robin, scores on his left foot. But, none of his goals are like what you see Rashford do sometimes, when he picks it up near halfway or out wide on the touchline and dribbles into the area. You just don't really see that from Antony. And from what I see of him at Ajax, it was the same there. He's a player who you get the ball to in the final third. You get the ball to when the defenders are already on the back foot, when he can put a ball in or combine on the edge of the area, or when a defence is stretched. He's not someone you give it to on halfway and say, right, go and beat the last man or stay clear of the defence, because he doesn't have that in his locker, I don't think. So, yeah, at the moment, I just don't really get it at the moment, to be honest. And, he did look brighter. Maybe he'll become an option off the bench against teams who are looking for goals, and teams, when United are winning, he might be an option off the bench because United will get a bit more joy further forward. There'll be a few more spaces to kind of get him into, but I don't think the team at the moment, the way it's playing, is set up to really get the best out of him. And on that point, I'm not really sure there's any point in playing him, to be honest.
Well, look, it's brutal, but it's absolutely true. That's the thing, and we'll always say it honestly, because that's our jobs, Tyrone. But I mean, you could probably copy and paste some of what you've just said there about Anthony, about Mason Mount, not knowing where he's going to fit in the team, why the club actually invested such a large fee in signing him. Obviously, Mason Mount was signed for 55 million, rising to 60 from Chelsea in the summer. He was brought to play in a deep line midfield position, but he's been out of the team for weeks. But as I said, he replaced Eriksen, who had that kind of settled midfield with Fernandes and McTominay recently. Ten Hag's like that, and it's worked, to be fair. And obviously, if Eriksen's out and Mount's coming in, that could be an opportunity, couldn't it? And he could eventually play in the role that he was supposed to be playing in when he first arrived.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't give Mount a pass entirely, but again, I think I've said previously that he's kind of being asked to go back to a role he never really played at Chelsea in midfield, and he's coming into a dysfunctional team. But he's not started a game of note now since just before the last international break, and that Brentford game. He's essentially fifth choice midfielder now, probably. And again, alarm bells would be ringing. What has he been signed for? And I know this team is hit by injuries. I know there's key injuries, certainly with Shaw and Martinez, but it shouldn't be affecting it so badly that you've basically got to rip up the entire midfield as well. And it's another sort of question mark over Ten Hag's judgment on signings, I guess, at the moment. And I still think there's plenty of time for Mason Mount to come good. He's clearly a solid technical player, but the issue there is kind of this. Too often this season, United just are not physical enough in midfield. They're not mobile enough, dynamic enough in midfield. Eriksen has impacted games off the bench. He's looked, we know what a good passer is. He's managed to kind of set some meaning almost to games at times this season, but physicality is not a strong point in a three-man midfield. When you've got Eriksen and Casemiro in there, I think it's an issue. It's maybe not too bad at the moment when Casemiro's out of there, but it needs a bit more dynamism, and Mount can probably provide that, but he just hasn't been doing. He hasn't really impacted any games at the moment. He's not had a standout performance, a breakthrough performance. And yeah, I think considering he was the one Ten Hag wanted to kind of rejig his midfield and push his midfield forward, the fact he's now behind Eriksen, behind McTominay, I think has got to be a concern, and this might be an opportunity to get some games maybe, but we need to see what Ten Hag had in mind for him, because I don't think it's clear to any of us at the moment.
I saw someone on Twitter actually made like a mini highlights package of Mount second half performance against Luton. And don't get us wrong, Tyrone, I actually thought he was quite good. But a highlight package against Luton Town. I think this is a club that used to win the Premier League each year. You can't be celebrating an appearance off the bench against bloody Luton, the mighty Hatters. Anyways, yeah, so very interesting, that one. It was probably a 13-year-old, to be fair, so we'll not go in too harsh with the criticism. Anyways, that's it for part 2. We'll be back in a moment for part 3. Welcome back to part 3 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, Tyrone, we were talking about the performances earlier, and look, how they've just not clicked. They've not improved really, although results have. And I guess after the international break, it's probably going to be the acid test. We've highlighted this run of fixtures a few times now. They've got Everton away in the Premier League, Galatasaray away in the Champions League, and Newcastle away again in the Premier League. So as 3 games go, that is really tough. And we've talked about what's going wrong, the weaknesses, etc. I mean, that they could get exposed in that run of games, couldn't it? And for all the positivity in the last few weeks, in the sense of they've got points on the board, it could turn toxic pretty quickly again after the break. Yeah,
it really could. I mean, they've 3 away wins this season: Burnley, Sheffield United, and Fulham. 3 average teams. I mean, 2 of them are going to be championship teams next year. Fulham have not been great this year, and would probably be in a relegation battle, but for the fact that the bottom 3 seems booked already, and their away form, even last season, the back end of last season was disastrous. at the moment, I don't think you've got any faith in this team to go anywhere that you would consider even slightly hostile and win a game, which arguably suggests that they won't win any of those three. Everton feels like a really big one. I mean,
Everton are in good form suddenly, aren't they? Yeah, Dyche's got them playing.
They're scoring goals. They're physical. They're really strong and physical in midfield. And I think Dyche will know how to get about United. He'll know how to try and rattle them. And I think that's going to be a real test of character, because it could set the tone for that week, really. Because Galatasaray is clearly a really tough place to go. They're a decent side. They were pretty. I was going to say they're pretty good at Old Trafford. I mean, I'm not sure if they were that good, to be honest. I mean, United bossed that game for 70 minutes and then threw it away. But what we do know is the atmosphere is going to be intense, and it's do or die for United in the Champions League now, isn't it? I think they're pretty much done for anyway, to be honest. But it's just a huge game, and then obviously Newcastle, who are struggling with injuries and suspensions. Newcastle fans making a few excuses for them at the moment, and it's still a difficult place to go, as Arsenal found out last week. And that at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night, we can guarantee that there's been a few drinks supped in the big market that afternoon, and it's going to be a lively atmosphere again. And you think all three of those are going to be big atmospheres and tough places for United to go. And I just don't think anyone at the moment has got any faith in United winning away against a good side in front of a loud, difficult crowd to face. And all three of those probably fit that box. So it is a big week. I mean, I think if United win 2 of those 3 away games, you'd have to say it's been a success that week. Yeah.
Oh, that would be excellent. Yeah, that would be excellent. I mean, the Newcastle game doesn't look as intimidating as it did a few weeks ago. As you said, they've got 12 injuries, 2 suspensions. So it'll be interesting to see how their squad's looking in a few weeks' time. In terms of the Champions League hopes then, Tyrone, you said you think they're pretty much done for. But we had this discussion on the last podcast, me, Rich and Samuel, where I think they both suggested that just dropping out completely out of Europe might be beneficial. But I argued, look, I mean, they're not going to win the FA Cup, probably not. I mean, obviously they could. They got to the final last year, but they're out of the Carabao Cup. They're definitely not going to win the Premier League. So surely if you want to win a trophy, and this club it's winning trophies in its fabric and its DNA, it's what it's all about. You need to win silverware at Manchester United. The Europa League's the best chance of that, surely.
Well, yeah, if they end up in there, it would be, and it's a route back into the Champions League, potentially. I mean, 5th place might be a route into the Champions League this year as well with the changes, but winning the Europa League could be. And it's the group stages of the Europa League can be a real slog, especially for clubs who don't think they belong in there, like United. Although United are making a pretty convincing case over the last few years that they do belong in the Europa League, I think it's fair to say. But once you get to the knockout rounds, once you get to the quarterfinals, you normally get still some pretty big teams left. Look at United when United won it in 2017. You're not telling me that didn't mean anything. And obviously there were emotional reasons for why that final was so special coming after the arena bombing. But it's still, when you get to a European final, even in the Europa League or a European semi-final or quarter-final as it will be, it's still special. It can still be a great atmosphere. There's every chance of drawing a big team. And of course, United want to stay in the Champions League. Of course, they want to beat Galatasaray and Bayern Munich and get that second place. But yeah, I think you'd want to be in the Europa League, and I think you'd want to go and win it just to kind of say, look, to guarantee being back in the Champions League, and just to kind of prove to players as much as anything, like that was an aberration falling out of the Champions League. We're back again next year. Don't worry about it, because again, I've said it a couple of times previously. They are
invited guests.
Yeah, the invited guests line, and that's kind of what they're becoming. They've won two or three meaningful Champions League matches in 10 years. They need to start proving that they are a big, proper European team. And obviously winning the Europa League is not what they set out to do. But if that's where they end up, then, I would rather, I think they should certainly be aiming for, I would rather, but, I think they would want to finish 3rd rather than 4th. And there is still, although it's not what you started the season wanting to do, there is still a prestige in winning the Europa League if you go that far.
I completely agree. And you never know, they might get another decent draw in the knockout round, because they obviously got Barcelona last season, and that was a fantastic game. It's usually some minnows, isn't it? Some rubbish European side, but you can't turn your nose up at getting Barcelona. We'll give a quick mention to what we're doing today, Tyrone. Obviously, it's Monday morning as we record this, but so Bobby Charlton's been laid to rest today. Pardon me, and I'm going across to Old Trafford. The funeral procession will pass through there, and it'll go into Manchester Cathedral. Well, I think 1,000 people are going to be there. They're expecting, and Sir Alex Ferguson is among those who will be attending. So it's going to be a really emotional day for everyone involved with the club, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's the tributes we had to Bobby when he died were very special. Certainly the two home games against Copenhagen and Manchester City. I think I was at both of those, and that will live long in the memory. Those tributes on those 2 days, and very different as well. Very very different tributes. Obviously, one was an applause at the City, the minute silence at Copenhagen, and the lone piper leading Ten Hag and Alex Stepney and Dan Gore out the tunnel. They were. That was a beautiful tribute, that with the piper coming out. Yeah, that was beautiful tribute. Yeah. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up on that occasion. And yeah, I thought when that piper was playing and it was just, that's all you could hear in the ground. That was one of those kind of spine tingling special moments. And yeah, it's going to be. It's going to be the same today. Like I say, 1,000 people expected there. I'm sure there'll be lots of people lining the streets. We've said previously he's. I can't remember who said this. It was it was a United fan on Twitter. So apologies if it was you and I've forgotten. But someone said if each club could only basically have one legend, then United's would be Charlton. People who were around watching him will debate whether he was the club's greatest ever player or not, or whether it was George Best. But I think he's certainly the club's most significant figure ever, ahead of someone like Sir Alex Ferguson, just for what he did on the playing side. He's 39 years as director, and obviously surviving Munich and then winning the European Cup 10 years later as captain and scoring in that final. What he achieved on and off the pitch at United is phenomenal. And yeah, it is going to be a very poignant and I think a very emotional day for the club.
We'll leave it there then, Tyrone. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thanks to listeners as usual. Check out our socials across for the Manchester Is Red podcast and the YouTube channel, where we're ticking across nicely with subscribers. But in the meantime, have a great week. Take care.